Hello, everybody. I'm Lucas Kendall. This is my friend Charlie Vignola,
Hi.
and we are here with our special guest, Paul ZEIDMAN. Did I pronounce that right?
That is exactly right. Thank you for saying it the correct way. I get multiple versions of my last name.
Jewish?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I know. So we got two Jews and one Italian today. All right. And
Set up
we're
of
here,
a good joke. Okay.
so we're here to talk about screenwriting, and because people will tune away if it's boring, we should stick to the theme of how can you become famous? Because that's something we've all been trying to do for decades, and have we learned anything or not? And so, Paul, you're our guest. And,
Okay.
So we're going to look to Paul. We're going to look to Paul.
Thank you.
I invited you because you had a cool blog where you have a lot of interviews with screenwriters and people sort of screenwriter adjacent,
Yes.
consultants, contest people, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I can give you the thumbnail history of that. So yeah, I run the Maximum Z blog. I've been doing that since 2009. So when I started, I had the intention, I'm going to post something every day. And you know how long that lasted?
7 days.
Two whole weeks.
2 days.
2 weeks.
Wow.
2 weeks. And then I thought, oh my God, this is exhausting. So then I decided, I think I can scale it back a bit. So then I went to 2 days a week. So it was Tuesdays and Fridays. And even that was still an effort to put together. And I think I did that for, I'll say, a couple of years, and maybe even like 5 or 6 years. And after that, I was just starting to really feel burned out. And I thought, you know what? There's nothing wrong with doing it once a week, because I knew a lot of other blogs at the time were doing that. So I just decided Friday's probably the best day to post something. So that's what I started doing. And I've been doing that ever since. And it's been a lot easier. The blog is, when I started, it was kind of almost like an online journal, as blogs kind of were when they first started, that it was really about me chronicling my progress with writing my scripts, but also my efforts to try and establish a career as a working screenwriter. So I would write about, oh, I managed this number of pages today, or I sent out X number of query letters today, or hey, I got a rejection letter from a query letter today. But also, as I realized people just didn't want to hear how things were going for me, that one of the things I noticed about a lot of other screenwriting blogs, it was about screenwriting. So I thought, well, what are some of the things that I've learned along the way? So I thought, I'll just write about my experience in trying to put stories together and trying to establish a career. So I was writing things like, what do we look for in a log line? Let's talk about structure. And I also had, as you mentioned, Lucas, a screenwriting adjacent thing. So I talked about, because I live in San Francisco, and at the time, a schoolmate of my daughter's, one of her moms works up at Skywalker Sound. And so one of the prizes of a school silent auction was a trip to the Skywalker Sound facility, the ranch up in Marin County. There's no way I could have afforded what it finally went for, but I ended up talking to the mom at some school event, and she invited us up there, my wife and I. So we got a private tour of Skywalker Sound. It is so cool that we got to see the main building and some of the actual props from like actual lightsaber hilts, and the fertility idol from Raiders, and Charlie Chaplin's bowler or his derby cap and his cane with a letter of authenticity. And they also showed us like where they do the recording for some of the orchestra. So they have adjustable walls where they can adjust the pitch of the room. And Lucas, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about.
I had a private tour. I was very lucky. By the way, I wish you were more articulate about these things. It's going to be a long show. So yeah, I had a private tour. I was very lucky. I met the president of Lucasfilm at the time, was named Gordon Radley, and he went to the same college I went to. I wrote liner notes in 1993 for a Star Wars CD project, and they wrote about me in the alumni magazine. And then one day in the mail, I got a letter with a poster, an original Star Wars poster, first run print, signed by George.
Wow.
And it was from Gordon Radley, who had gone to the same college, and he, a very gracious guy, reaching out to a young person and said, if you're ever this way, I'll show you around the ranch. And I made a reason to be out that way. And so I saw exactly that room with the adjustable walls, from a live echo to a very dead sound.
Yeah, and so I wrote about that experience in a post. just because, you know, as we talked about before we started, I'm a big Star Wars person. So just to be able to say, yes, I've been to the ranch, you know, it's like one of those bucket list things. And a lot of people think it's not like a Star Wars theme park. It's a working production facility focused on sound and editing and everything that's not really about film production. But it's just a mind-blowing experience to be there and just to say that you were there. And it's just, you know, it's a really cool thing to be able to say.
So Paul, does your love of Star Wars make its way into the kind of material you write? Do you write in that genre?
That's a great question. In a way it is, because people will say, well, what do you like to write? And I say, I love to write ripping yarns and tales of high adventure. And, you know, I'm a kid who grew up late 70s and through the 80s. So, you know, Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, The Goonies, Back to the Future, these are huge influences. I mean, I love these films. I could watch them over and over again, and I have, but they're also a big influence on my writing and my storytelling. Like one of my more successful film or scripts, so to speak, it's not a film yet, I'm working on that, is a Western, because I love Westerns. And I just thought, well, what's a different take or what's a different spin that I can put on the Western genre? And I'm also a big fan of old time radio. So listeners of a certain age will know some of these shows like The Shadow and, you know, Jack Benny. And there was a show called The Cisco Kid, which was a Western, really, you know, kind of for kids. And there was a show about this woman who had taken over the train line after her father had been killed by bandits. And I just thought, a girl in a train. And that was the spark that did it for me. So I wrote this script called The Iron Horse of Lucy Steele, which in my 5-second pitch, it's a female Indiana Jones in the Wild West plus trains. And people who read it, you know, it's been very well received. It's done okay in some contests, but you know, that's kind of like, if you say, what's your best writing sample? I'll say, this is it. And when you tell people, yeah, I wrote a Western, it's almost like, why? And I say, well, because one of my, I guess, mottos is write something I would want to see. So I like Westerns, I like action movies, and I like fun action movies, like roller coaster rides. And so this is something I wanted to write. And so it took me a good number of years and multiple drafts to put it together. And of the end result, I'm really proud of it. I think it's a great sample. And I've had people say that, you know, it's a fast read. It's really exciting. It's got characters you haven't really seen before. And it's just a unique experience. So I'm just working on, hopefully, you know, someday it'll make it to the big screen.
And this is a more recent script that you've worked on as opposed to an older script? This is something...
It's probably at this point a couple of years old, but it's done okay in a couple of contests over the past couple of years. Like it won for Best Western. I think it was... oh gosh, what was it? Creative Screenwriting Contest. They had a genre category, so it won for Best Western, and it excuse me, it was like first runner-up for Action Adventure with Emerging Screenwriters from 2 years ago. But also, I decided probably the end of 2020, I thought, you know, I've just kind of burned out on contests after a while, so I just thought I'm going to take a break. And I've only entered like 3 in the past year, really just the big 3, Austin, Page, and the Nickel. And no regrets, because as any writer who does a lot of contests will just quickly discover those fees really add up. Because I calculated how many contests I'd entered. I think it was like 2019-ish. And I'd done like 14 or 15 contests, but the fee, I try to do as many early birds as I can. And I don't pay for the notes, but it was like $1,400 for all those fees. That's a lot of money.
I will say that until I started doing the show and going on some Facebook screenwriting groups, I had no idea about this wild west of screenwriting contests. You know, it was one of those things where, you know, working for a production company, obviously I was aware of the Nickel Fellowship. Obviously I was aware of Austin. There were 2 or 3 that I was aware of. I guess I had no idea there were dozens and dozens, and
there's more like hundreds. There's more like hundreds of contests.
Yeah.
And the thing is that I know a really good friend of mine, a writer, his script won the Fade In Action contest a couple of years ago. But from what I can understand, it wasn't the best experience because they had him constantly doing rewrites and touch-ups on it. I guess they were trying to get it more, I don't know, production company friendly or more marketable. It was a really unique concept, but he wasn't done with the writing after he had won this contest. He had to keep
Right.
doing more work. And I think in the end, nothing really happened with it. So, I mean, yeah, it's a great thing to have to say I won the grand prize this year, but he wasn't able to really turn it around and make anything happen with it. And as we said, there's a lot of contests out there, and you can win the grand prize of like the Des Moines screenwriting contest, but in the end, it comes down to like, who cares? because people want, because if it's not the Nickel, Austin, or Page, those are really the big three that people pay attention to.
Well, again, if you're working in the business, I would say those are the ones that you pay attention to, and anything else would have to come in through a manager or an agent that is well known, because otherwise, you're right. If the Des Moines screenwriting I don't know, if somebody sent me a query letter basically saying, for all I know, that's a made-up contest that doesn't even exist, and they said they won it, like, I couldn't tell. But
so I kind of had an epiphany, and my philosophy has been like, I realized in the beginning, who cares? I did do a bunch of contests, and I had like some semi-finalists, and you know, you get a free subscription to something, and you get the little badges on your cover file. It really, to have the same script not go anywhere and then be a I tired of them, and I have a low opinion of them, and I'm done with them. The only exception is that I did submit to the finish line because I wanted her notes, and she gives good notes, so I was just using it as a note service. I've learned that it's more important to keep working and revising, even if you have to do page one rewrites. But the other epiphany I had is that, let's say you do win a contest or be a finalist, because you really can't count on winning anything. If you have a really high quality piece of material, it's either probably going to be a semi-finalist or finalist or better, but it's just random. It's just what they like or what they think is cool, or what somebody likes very early in the process that gave it weird scores, or not, you know, it's a black box.
Well, but
here's the thing.
Oh, yeah, please.
Here's the thing. So let's say you win. They don't suddenly give you a career. What they do is they have their industry people, they send out a little newsletter and say, here are the scripts that won that we love. And they give you the log line. And the companies might be predisposed to actually read it, as opposed to if I send a query letter to them where they're just going to not read it. But they still have to like the log line. And if the log line sounds like an esoteric, hugely expensive movie that's kind of soft, I mean, they're getting 14 log lines at once. They'll pick the 2 or 3 that are really sexy. So it's all about the log line. And if you have an awesome log line, you don't need a contest. And if you win a contest, but your log line is kind of weird and soft, it's not going to do anything for you.
Well, that's the thing, is like a lot of the scripts that have won the Nickel, that only I think a very small fraction of them make it to production, because the concept is really what grabs people. That I've seen so many people who've won the Nickel, you know, okay, you won, that's great, but they're not able to do anything with the script. I mean, I know a woman, she's been a finalist in the Nickel twice. I don't think she's been in the top 5, but she was in I think the top 10 twice. And one of those scripts, it took her like 8 years to do to get things rolling with that script. So as you said, it's no guarantee. I know of a guy, I think he won Austin for television a couple of years ago, and he lives in Australia, and he had some Zoom meetings with a lot of production companies and representation, and everyone was like, yeah, it's a great script, but the general consensus was, I can't really sell this. It's great. It's an entertaining script. It's well written, but I don't know how to market this. It's just too, there's no way to really put a label on it. And so he was thrilled to have won, but it was crushing for him just to not have anything happen with it. And he actually I think he took a year off of writing completely, because he was just just to put it mildly.
So, what are your experiences? So I assume you have a day job?
I do. Yeah. So my day job is I do traffic reports on the radio. So I've got the headphones and the microphone here.
Oh, good. All right.
That's why he has such a mellifluous voice. I'm noticing.
You got a vocal presence.
Oh, you should hear me. You should hear me in the morning when my voice is like an octave deeper, because I just wake up and I've got the coffee thing going.
Right.
But I've been able to, I make the time to write when I can. And because in the morning I get a little downtime, so sometimes that's when I'm reading a friend's script or working on my own stuff, revising an outline or editing or whatever, that I try to make the time as often as I can each day. And sometimes I'm only able to do a little bit. Some days I can't do anything because I've got so much other stuff going on. But I always try to do something each day to help myself along.
And do you have you had experiences being repped or almost repped or
well, yeah, actually I have that a good number of years ago. I did get a manager who helped me with a page 1 rewrite of a comedy that I had, and then he shopped it around and could not get any traction on it at all. And I think that kind of soured him on, like, I'm not sure if it was the script or the relationship. He was more or less nice, but he kind of just started to not get back to me very quickly with calls or emails.
They're such weasels.
This is a very common phenomenon.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
I will say that I have many friends who were lucky enough to get a manager or an agent to promise you the world based on what they think is a great spec, a great writing sample, and then it's like you really get one shot. You give them the script, you give them the idea, and if they don't sell it, it's like, lose my number. They won't say that. But
it's interesting that you said that, because so we did the rewrite and he shopped it around to because he used to be at a big agency and then he struck out on his own. And so we worked on this script together and he shopped it around, did not get any the responses that he was hoping for. So then the response time from my stuff to him, we kept growing and growing. And then it was like almost a month, 2 months where I'd even hear anything from him. And then I got a phone call from him or an email saying, we need to talk. And I was saying, thank God, finally. And so we got on the call. His name was Jerry. And so the phone rings. I go, hello, hey, Jerry, or hey, Paul, it's Jerry. Well, as you probably guessed, I'm not really in film anymore. Because he was trying to make the transition to television, and he was a producer on a show that had 2 episodes on at the time the WB network, and then it was canceled. And then the last I heard, he was working for some media company in New York, and that was it. I just thought, well, I'll just have to chalk it up to experience. It was not the best experience, but I had a manager for a little bit, and then there was another guy who found me because I had this fantasy swashbuckler script that I think got an 8 on the blacklist. And this was just as the blacklist was taking off. The one you pay to have people written, right. not the one that the industry.
Not the real one on the website.
Yeah, not the real one, the one that's open to the public.
Okay.
He found my script and he said, I really like the script. I read it, liked it, and wanted to represent me. I was like, great, let's do that. The only problem was he was in New York and he was kind of just learning how to be a manager. And so I'd even asked him, well, how often do you deal with LA production companies or other entities? And he said, I go out there a couple of times a year. I was like, okay, that's great. Nobody else is coming and saying, hey, I want to represent you. So he shopped it around to a couple of places and again, did not get any responses. And we had a year-long contract expired and poof, he disappeared. And I thought, okay, well, that's just one of those things. And so I eventually, probably like 2 or 3 years later, discovered he was on LinkedIn, and he had gone to, I guess, agent school at CAA. And then he was working for a boutique management agency. And then he had struck out on his own again, but he actually had more clients and it was actually seemed to be doing really well. And I was like, that's great. So I just sent him an email saying, hey, it's me, I'm really glad to see how great things are going for you. Any chance we can maybe talk? I'm looking for representation. Nothing. So not a response. And I thought, okay, well, I guess that's how he wants to do it. So, I bear him no ill will. That's just the way he wants to do it. What's that?
How are you so nice?
You have to be, because I'd rather be nice than just be consumed by my inner rage, because that's so easy. Well, because when you're a writer, because as you've heard, you're going to hear 1,000 no's before you get that one yes, and you can't give up that easily. Bad things are going to happen for you. It's just the way the business is. That, well, you can look at it this way. The Nickel gets like 8,500 entries a year, And so that's all those people want to be successful screenwriters. And if you look at those scripts, a majority of them are very badly written. I've read for a couple of big contests. There's a lot of people who do not know how to really put a script together, let alone do one well. That you are really competing against every other writer out there to try and make it as a professional working screenwriter. So you can't let the bad things that happen to you get you down, or else you're just going to be down all the time. Because I see this on Twitter all the time. There's so many writers who'll be like, oh, the manager said no to my query, I'm just going to give up. It's like, you've sent out like 3 queries.
No, I don't mean like your enthusiasm. I mean like you're so gracious about it, whereas I'm more like an elephant never forgets, you know.
Oh, trust me, just because this is how I'm acting right now does not mean this is all of it. I mean, yes, there are the times where
you have your moments.
Of course I do. Every writer does. But you can't let the rage consume you, because then you're just going to be, it's going to make it that much more frustrating the longer things go, because you have to pretty much like when you send a query letter or enter a contest, you send it, move on to the next thing. And sometimes I forget if did I enter that contest? Well, see, we're going to announce the quarterfinalists or the semifinalists. I have to actually look through my email records. Did I enter that? Because sometimes I don't remember. And sometimes I've been pleasantly surprised when I'll go through the list of like which scripts have advanced, like, oh my gosh, that's mine. I don't remember.
You really can't put all your eggs in one basket. You have to have a lot of eggs in a lot of baskets.
Yeah. You have to. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I was going to ask you, Paul, what the comedy that you went out with. Do you remember what the logline?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a kind of like a culture clash comedy. I pitch it as Jewish cook in a Chinese restaurant.
Okay.
And it's about an aspiring Caucasian chef who the only job he can get is in a struggling family-run Chinese restaurant that I forget what the bad guy, the sleazy conglomerate owner or whatever down the street, he wants to tear their restaurant down to build a parking lot. So he helps him turn it around, and it's a very silly script. And I love bad jokes, and it's got a lot of those. And again, Jew, so lots of familiarity with Chinese restaurants.
Right. And then the swashbuckler fantasy idea.
That one is, pardon me if I don't get the logline exactly right. I haven't said it in a while. Okay. Headstrong teen has to rescue his little sister who's been abducted into a hidden city behind the clouds. And if they don't make it home by sunrise, they'll be stuck up there forever.
Okay.
So that one's kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean and Star Wars, and just a lot of, again, swashbuckly action.
Do you want our feedback commercially?
Sure. I mean,
because I'll bet you we're going to say the same thing.
Okay.
What would you say, Charles?
Well, for the restaurant one, I would say, kind of small potatoes. Not
I know. Yeah.
Enough. You have a fish out of water, sort of, with a Jewish cook in a Chinese restaurant, but it's very, very small. And again, it's the kind of thing where if I'm going through log lines, just a lot of log lines for something that's going to pop out and grab me. Well, especially again where I worked. I worked for Jared Bruckheimer.
Yeah.
So there's no way that lands in front of me, just because that's not the kind of movies that we would make. Right. But maybe there's a smaller. I mean, even if it was Judd Apatow's company, or even if it was Will Ferrell's Gary Sanchez, or a company that makes comedies, that would be like half of a comedy. There's like missing another half of that.
Is it? I assume it's not a rom-com, but it could work if there's it's like a Mr. Bates.
Well, there is a love interest, but I will also say this is one of my first scripts. So yeah, granted, the concept not the most solid, but it's still a fun script, and I'm not looking to change the world with that one.
No, we understand.
I will say this too, and Lucas will probably agree with me on this, that you mentioned there's 85,000 screenplays a year that are probably registered, copyrighted, that kind of thing. But 99% of them are unreadable. This is what I tell anybody who wants to be a screenwriter, which is like, don't let those numbers completely daunt you, because on some level, 99% of them are unreadable. They're out of format. Nobody has to know they don't know how to put together a screenplay. Then out of those, the ones that are readable fall into two categories, which are, there's ones that have good writing And this breaks my heart. Like, good writing, but the idea is either middling, generic, middle of the road, that kind of thing. And so you're hoping, well, maybe there's a voice to the script. You know, it's like, well, the idea is a guy goes home after the death of his father and basically has to come to terms with his life. That's not an idea that's popping out of me. But if it's James L. Brooks and I'm reading it, I'm like, oh my God, the characters are fantastic and the dialogue is superb, and it's like cut heart and it's funny, but it's like I'm never going to be able to go into my bosses and say, you got to read the script with that
say,
idea.
Hey, we should look at this writer. If it was
the writer,
you can count on me.
So what would happen there is you get the writer in for a meeting. You get the writer in for a meeting, and you basically said, well, we read man goes back to hometown after a father's death. Not our thing, but the writing is great. What else you have? So you're hopefully that's what's going to happen. And then there's people who have a good idea, maybe even a great idea, and the writing is just not very good. They could sell that as an idea, and then, you know, somebody will pick it up. I mean, say it's like so high concept, it's like Cowboys and Aliens or some ridiculous, super over the top thing. Like that might sell because the idea is so high concept that it's like, well, we have one contracted rewrite with them, so we'll do that. But after that, we're going to go hire Jeff Nathanson, or, you know, we're going to hire some big heavy hitter or whoever we can get to do that. So that kind of happens too. Very rarely do you see like a great writer with great ideas. It's almost like, you know, good writer with middling ideas, okay writer with some great ideas. And the ones who can do both, like a J.J. Abrams, never stop working. That's the reason why they're always working.
Well,
because you try to find them.
Well, I will say that you can kind of gauge how my writing has improved. I'm not saying I'm a fantastic writer, but I am going to say that my writing has definitely improved with pretty much each draft of each script. So like if you look at the Chinese restaurant script, yeah, it's good and the writing is okay. But if you look at that one and then you look at the Swashbuckler, you can tell that it might even be hard to tell they were written by the same writer, because the second one, the writing is a little sharper, it's a little crisper, there's more structure to it that I really put in the effort to just make it better each time. And I got a lot of feedback from some great writer friends, and they helped make it into that. And so from there, then the next script I think was the Western, that again, there's, Chinese restaurant, Swashbuckler, the Western, that the writing is constantly getting better. Again, I'm not saying, this is a textbook example of what a script should look like, but I've had a lot of compliments and a lot of high praise for this Western, saying that, the writing is really crisp. The story just moves like that. I love the characters. I love the dialogue. It's a great story. It's original, wonderful things to hear. But I also try to focus on not just having a good script and a good story, but having that it's a good experience for the reader, that I want them to forget they're reading a script. I want them to want to be able to, they want to turn the page. They've got to know what's going to happen next.
So what is the log line of the female train thing? If you're going to try to, you're on a Zoom call with somebody from, Amblin, and it's like, okay, Paul, give me the two-liner for what's the title?
It's called The Iron Horse of Lucy Steele.
The Iron Horse of Lucy Steele. Okay. And what is the basic idea?
The basic idea, it's 1874, a fiery female train engineer relentlessly pursues the ruthless outlaw who has stolen her late father's locomotive to pull off the biggest heist of the 19th century. And as I said, my 5-second pitch, it's a female Indiana Jones in the Wild West plus trains. And I've told that to people, both in writing groups and also at pitch sessions, and everyone's like, ooh, I really like the sound of that, because it's one of the things people told me when I started working on the script. So many people said, well, everybody loves a Western, but nobody wants to pay to make one. And
we have some experience with that as the company that made the Lone Ranger, the most expensive Western of all time, bar none, starring the biggest movie star in the world at the time, and still couldn't find a way to make that work. Now, that's not because you can't make a Western work. Obviously, Quentin Tarantino proved you can. If Quentin Tarantino were hired to do the Lone Ranger, I'm sure it would have been a big hit movie. But, for a variety of reasons, our Lone Ranger movie didn't do well. Now, what happens when that occurs is a pitch like yours will immediately get compared to, okay, well, there's no IP. It's incredibly expensive. Like one of the most expensive aspects of the Lone Ranger movie that we made was the train stuff. Because, you know, we had to build, there's a big train climax in the movie. And the Act 3 is like one of the most crazy train chases you've ever seen. And originally, Gore wanted authenticity. So what we did is we built miles of train track out in the desert with actual trains, and it didn't work. we did all that for authenticity, and at the end of the day, it didn't really kind of come together the way they wanted to. They still had to rely on CG and green screen and all that kind of stuff, and it did ultimately come together. It's pretty cool. The climax is pretty cool, but all that costs money. It, you know, yours is an original, so it's not based on the Lone Ranger. It's not based on some sort of IP. And then the idea of, you know, a woman trying to get revenge for her father is like, okay, that's fine. That's, you know, that's fine. The using the train for the biggest train heist of all time. Okay, biggest of all time. That might be something, but it's like it fits into that kind of like middle area, you know, where it's sort of it would have to be execution contingent. And if you read, because the log line itself would be kind of like, it's a Western, female-driven Western, trains expensive. So it's like, if somebody read it, they're just like, holy cow, this thing is just like thrill a minute. And then the studio is still going to say, yeah, but Lone Ranger, you know, like, so it's an easy way to kind of like.
When they give you a list of like, here are the 5 biggest female stars in the world, get one of them. And then
right.
Get a director first.
Yeah, but so when you're, well, let me ask you, Paul, when you're sitting right now, I don't know if you're working on a script right now. Are you working on something right now?
Of course, yes.
You're always working on something. Okay. Yep. So how did you decide, because I always ask this, we asked Fred, we asked Lucas, out of all the ideas you have in your hat, how do you decide which one you're going to spend 4 or 5 months on? Is it just the one that's calling you the most creatively, or do you think it's the most marketable? How do you decide?
See, that's the, I don't really write to the market. I just write like which story am I the most excited about? Which one do I think would be fun to write? Because I found that when the writer is really excited about the story, that almost is evident on the page, because you can sense the excitement of the story. And like I said, I like to write fun adventure type stuff. I just finished the latest draft of I call it my animated fantasy comedy. So it's kind of like Harry Potter, but in reverse, which goes to New Jersey. And I'm waiting for notes on it. It was just fun to write. And it was something I'd been jotting down ideas for that story over the past couple of years. And then a while ago, I decided, okay, I'm actually going to sit down and write this now. And I wrote a draft on it, and I thought it was okay. I knew it needed a lot of work, but I was prepping to do the rewrite, and I kept thinking, okay, something's not clicking here for me. What could it be? And so I took a step back and worked on another script for like a month, 2 months. But it always in the back of my mind was like, what is it do I need to fix about this other script? And then I kind of looked at it, and I was just going, okay, something's just not right. What is it? And then I realized I had the wrong character as the protagonist. So this character that originally was a supporting character, I thought her story is much more interesting than the person I originally came up with the story for. And so I switched it around, and that was the click. And so I was able to really make a lot of progress on that rewrite, and it just really came together. And I just had a lot of fun just plotting out what was going to happen. Like I said, like Back to the Future, a big influence. I'm a huge believer in setups and payoffs in a story. So something that'll happen in the first act will pay off either second or third act. And so I try to plant those as I outline. I mean, I outline like crazy before I even start on pages, because I want to make sure that the outline in the story is really as rock solid as I can get it. And of course, after I finish that draft, I find there's other things that need work, but it's pretty solid. It's maybe 65 to 75% there. So the rewrite is not as extensive. So as I was saying, that I was really excited to work on this, and I spent time on it. And I always think it's going to take me a lot longer than it does, but I guess because I'm excited to do the writing and spend time on it, it goes a lot faster for me. So that way, yes, I may not be done with the rewrite as fast as I would like to, but it's a little more solid than I was expecting it when I'm done with that draft. So right now,
are you doing more outlining as you're getting further along, and do you find that that's making it easier to get your initial drafts done?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, because I kind of I kind of work at pretty much from the ground up, that I'll come up with what are the main plot points of the story, what could happen between, the opening image and, what's the, I don't want to say this, I follow it to the letter. What's the theme of the story? What's the inciting incident? What's this little twist around like 17 or 18 first act turning point? So once I set those up, I'm able to start filling in the blanks between them. And sometimes I have to, and this happened with another story that I'm working on, that I worked on like several outlines for it, but it still wasn't clicking. And so I realized, okay, I just have to take another step back. So what is a different approach? Because what I had before, it was good, but it just wasn't enough. So I needed to figure out what is the better approach. And so I would just start coming up with random approaches, like, okay, how about this? How about this? And then sometimes something would click and I'd try that. Okay, it got me only to a certain point. So I had to almost take another step back. There's a lot of prep work for me that goes into outlining, because again, like I said, I want to have the outline be as solid as possible before I start on pages, because it's a lot easier to put the story together when you only have one sentence to deal with rather than 3 pages.
And how many, at this point, if you had to guess, how many scripts from the very first one that you tried to write to the one you're working on right now, how many scripts is that?
Probably in the 12 to 15 range, somewhere in there.
All right.
And of those, I would say maybe 5 to 6 are ones I'm willing to show to people, because I think they're good enough. They're great. They're not, perfect examples. Like one is a comedy about a dead comedian who had, like a Don Rickles type comedian who has to become a guardian angel. And that was just a lot of fun to write, because I was just coming up with all these I love bad jokes, and they're just, it was so silly. And I got some great feedback on it. I just haven't gotten around to doing the rewrite on it. So, but if that's on my to-do list, if you will.
But you know what? That's I think people out there who are trying to be screenwriters need to understand it's going to take some scripts. Like before you really hone your skills as a writer, almost nobody ever shows like their first effort, because it's so rough and you go through so many different scripts till you get to the one where it's professional. You feel like it's professional and good enough to show to people, and it's never going to be your first or your second screenplay, and a lot of people don't understand that.
And another point is that, so if you get the first draft of the script done, there's probably let's say a 99 to 100% chance that you're going to go through a lot of drafts of that before you get to the one you're most satisfied with. And there's also an extremely high chance that a lot of it's going to be different from what you started with. I mean, that happens to me all the time. I mean, like I said, I'll come up with a story, write it out, and then something it's not working, or I just want to try a different approach. And so it's different. And a lot of writers are like, oh no, but their material's too precious to them, that they don't want to change it.
That's another key problem, I think, with first-time writers or aspiring writers. It's not a problem. It's something you just have to learn, which is, they think that it's perfect. It's precious the way it is. I'm going to sell it to somebody. They're going to shoot it the way it is. And the reality is that unless you're going to raise the money, direct it, and shoot it yourself, that script will never, ever make it to screen the way you wrote it, because it's just not the way the process works. Again, unless you're working at a small level by yourself, you're working at a studio level, and you've got so much input from so many people, be it the executives at the production company, the studio executives, the director that you get on board, the stars, the test screening audience that's going to give you notes. It's a constant refinement process of the material, and sometimes it makes it worse, sometimes it makes it better. You never know until it's all done, but that is how it works. Again, unless you're willing to do it by yourself. And some people do that, and go to film festivals, and some of those people will go on to be Sam Raimi or George Romero, or some of these filmmakers that made very little movies and finally get a chance to do studio films.
Yeah. So I do want to point out. So Lukas, earlier you were asking, like, how can I be so gracious about, I guess, the rejections, but also I guess I approach screenwriting as a realist, that I may have a script that I love, that I think is great the way it is, but if someone came to me and said, okay, I love the way you write, and I really like this script, but if the only way we're going to get it made is if we make some changes, And I'm not going to be one of those writers who's going to say, well, no, this is the script, it has to be done as is. They're going to show me the door, and they're never going to get in touch with me again. I am willing to do what I need to, and if that means I have to change a script that I really like, that it'll kill me inside to have to change it. But if that's what it means to see this script move forward and towards production and actually get made, then that's what I'm going to do, because I don't want to be that.
Don't write an animated movie. Don't write an animated movie, because the only people who make animated movies, they develop them in-house.
That's true. That's true. I mean, Pixar is right across the bay from me, and they don't accept anything from the outside.
That's a cool idea. The Witch Comes to New Jersey. But I think that if you're writing it to be animated, I don't think you're going to be able to do anything.
Well, see, I guess the way I approach it, that yes, I would love, I guess for me, like the golden ticket is someone says it, reads the script, says, I love this. Let's, I love the writing. Let's love the story. It's great all over. Let's see what we can do to get this made. That's great. And if things work out, great. But if someone came to me and said, okay, I love this, great, I love the script, love the story, there's no way I could get this made, but I really like the way you write. Would you be willing to work? Would you be willing to work on this other thing? I'd be like, yeah, because to me, it's not about getting, yes, it would be fantastic to get my stuff made, but to be able to work on a script that actually gets advances into production, it's about being a working screenwriter. It's not necessarily about writing my stuff or getting my stuff produced. It's about scripts that I work on, whether or not I came up with them or not, to get them produced.
Well, philosophically, you definitely need writing samples, and preferably, in a couple of different genres, unless you want to be pigeonholed. I know that Lukas, like myself, we write sort of all over the place. Sometimes it'll be a drama, science fiction, fantasy, horror, action. It's all over the map. And Hollywood actually likes to pigeonhole people. They do.
Managers ask for it because they really
do, because it's like almost too complicated. It's like, wait, you wrote a buddy comedy and this is like, Nomadland, like what are you doing? It's like all over but I don't know. That's always been me. That's always been Lukas. I'm sure it sounds like you enjoy entertaining films. You grew up with Lukas and Spielberg the way I did, the way Lukas did. We're all in the same boat. Those are the people that inspire us to go out there, because they created these worlds that were so amazing that we wanted to be part of that experience and create our own worlds. But yeah, I think that, log lines are, really when people use the term log line, it's just, what is your movie idea? What's the premise? Log line has a very specific meaning, which is in coverage, which is a book report for a screenplay. The log line is just the 1 or 2 liner that describes what the story is. It's the TV guide listing. It's the thing when you're like going through the guide on your Netflix that explains what the idea is. That's all it is. So it's like a log line means that. But if I ask you what was your movie about, it doesn't have to be as precise as a log line, but you do want to sort of explain, like, it's about a person who's trying to do this, but this is, not working out, or whatever that thing is. But it can't be said enough. You can have a bunch of sample scripts and a bunch of writing samples, but you do need at some point to write something that's going to sell to Hollywood. So it's like, you have to figure out, like, what is your killer idea? What is like the best idea you have? And sometimes you have to sort of play around with it and kind of test market things with your friends and other writers and go like, which one of these is the one you want to see? Yeah,
there's only a few things that, a cheap horror movie with a cool concept, a sci-fi movie that's like a Black Mirror episode, a rom-com with a really cool concept, although those might be fading, or some cool twist on an action movie that can be made for the international market, where it's assassins, some spin on John Wick where it's just heads exploding. And those are the 4 lanes right now, where you have young producers or inexperienced producers trying to break in, and they're looking for cheap scripts from nobodies. And they're looking for things they can sell. And it's exactly what I just said. It's because of the financing models with the action movies, guy with a gun, girl with a gun, or the cool Black Mirror episode, or a cool idea for a horror movie that's sticky, that's catchy. And
I remember after John Wick, I couldn't tell you within 2 or 3 months the amount of female assassin scripts we got submitted. Like it was comical at a certain point. You know, one of my colleagues, she'd be like, "Oh, we got a hot spec coming in. Oh, what is it? It's like female assassin." I'm like, come on. Like at a certain point, like you can't sell 12 of them around.
They made a bunch though.
They kind of did, but it's like they were all kind of the same script. You know, they were all very stylized. Well, I believe one was called Ruthless, about, you know, a killer named Ruth, and literally, and like, you know, her daughter, she's an ex-assassin trying to make it as a single mother, of course, and the daughter is abducted, you know, because the bad guys need her for one last job, and so she's ruthless and going after the bad guys and getting her daughter back. And I'm like, well, you know,
well, yeah, think of after Taken came out, there were so many, not only a lot of Liam Neeson movies, but there were also all of these. Right. Like, okay, we need an action movie for this other actor of a certain age.
But this is a good idea. This is a good example, because people forget this again about Taken. It's not just a guy's daughter is kidnapped and he goes to get her back. That's not a movie idea. That's half of a movie idea. What's the other half? What's the thing that makes it special? What's the twist? The twist is somebody kidnaps James Bond's daughter. That's a bad thing to do when your father is James Bond, because James Bond is going to come after you like the Terminator and never stop. Boy, did you kidnap the wrong girl. That's super high concept. That's a good idea. If I heard that, I'd be like, okay, that's great. That's a really cool setup. So that, you know, and it's a good intellectual exercise, no matter what it is. It's like if I said to you, Paul, you know, we want a, you know, kind of an assassin movie. You better come up with a novel one. Come up with a novel twist on the assassin story. It can't just be a genre flip. It's got to be, what is the, you know, a dying assassin? Oh, dude, I have a million of those dying assassins. You have to come up with something that is novel that you haven't seen before.
They did the kid assassin.
What's that? A kid assassin?
They did that in Hannah.
Oh, okay. There you go. Right. Or I don't remember. The Professional wasn't that, right? It wasn't too assassin. So that was literally just Lone Wolf and Cub. That was an assassin with a little girl.
Much.
Yeah, okay. I don't like assassin movies because I don't want to sound like a square. I don't like the violence, and right. I've written violent stuff, and I like violent movies. I love The Wild Bunch, but when they make a game out of shooting people in the head, I mean, we've seen the news, and we don't need to talk about that. But I find it morally repugnant, and I don't want to write it, and I don't think I have to, because I think I can write other things that are as commercial. If I was going to write an assassin movie, it would be a real earthbound Le Carré kind of assassin movie. That's my sense of it.
Well, see, that's the thing, is that because you say assassin movie, I think of like, oh, okay, what are some like really great examples? I immediately went to like Day of the Jackal, but I also think like Grosse Pointe Blank is a good assassin. It's a hitman movie.
Well, that's a twist.
But it's very different. And so, but I guess it's my nature. I always go like, what's the comedic aspect of it? Like, what comedic angle can you apply to this? Because
look at Barry, the TV show.
I mean, Barry just gets better every week.
Okay, so that's an example right there, right? What's that?
I have a couple questions for Paul before.
Yeah, sure.
So do you have any aspirations to be a filmmaker? Probably not.
No, actually, someone asked me that, and I said, I'm still trying to put together my first short film, and then like to bring in a co-director, and that's all I want to do. I don't have any lofty aspirations to, you know, be in the director's chair. I just want to be the one who on the screen, it just says written by and screenplay by or whatever, that I don't come to me and say, hey, well, do you want to direct this? Yeah. Only if I were, I don't know. I don't want to say desperate or foolhardy, but I don't want to be a director. I love being a writer, and that's really what I want to do. I'm happy to talk to the director.
Yeah. How do you get feedback? Who do you?
I'm actually really fortunate that I have a lot of writers within my personal network, just a couple of people have had things produced that they're willing to give me notes. I also have some writers who, I know it's not the perfect benchmark, but they've done really well in contests, and I've read their stuff and it's really good. And so why some of these people aren't represented, or why they don't have their careers aren't further along, I'll never know. But the thing is that when I was starting out, I was just really desperate to get feedback. So I would ask like 20 or 25 people for notes. But the problem was that I would get so many different opinions about the material, and like, well, this person loved it, and this person thought it sucked, and this person thought it was okay. And I realized, okay, it's too many people. So I just started narrowing it down to the people whose opinions I really valued. So right now it's about 6, maybe 8 people at the most. But I think I was more desperate. So I would just, every draft, hey, I got a new draft of this. And I didn't want them to roll their eyes when they would see the email saying new draft ! So I would just wait until I thought the script was as solid as it could be. So if that means I have to go through a couple of drafts to get to that point, that's fine with me, because I'd rather it was maybe 6 to 8 months between when I started and when I contact someone, rather than, okay, I did the first draft, I'll do one quick, a real fast rewrite, call that draft number 2, and then ask someone to read it, because I'm not as confident in it as I think I should be, because I'd rather be more confident in the material. And if that takes 2 or 3 more drafts to get to that point, that's fine with me.
It's great that you have that network. What do you think about like screenwriting Twitter? Because I'm on there and I usually feel alone. I feel like
well, I'm not as active on it as I was maybe like a year ago, but I think also because a year ago a lot of us were stuck at home, and so that was our biggest interaction with really within the writing community was screenwriting Twitter and Zoom calls like this one. And I think just a lot of people spend a lot of time on social media. And to me, I can understand why, but I also think, okay, you've been on this for an hour, you could have gotten some writing done then. And so that's the thing, is that I see all these things. Oh, we're having a group chat or whatever. And it's like, well, that's great. But, I want to get another hour and a half. I want to get another 45 minutes of writing in. Then I got to start on dinner.
Paul, you know that any real writer is going to push off the actual sitting down in front of the computer as long as they possibly can.
That's not me. No, because I really enjoy the process of writing.
That's rare. It is rare. Lukas too.
Like I said, I've got all these.
I don't think I enjoy it, but it's I get to a point where I've just got the material in my head, and it's like, okay, time to vomit it out, and then you do the vomit draft, and then write it again, but very carefully, and then along the way, I try to outline, but
let me ask both of you about the vomit draft as a concept, because like I've never understood this. Anytime that I'm thinking about writing something, to me, it's all about like writing is preparation to write, right? Because the sitting down and actually writing the pages to me is the easiest part. That's not hard. The hard part is, what am I going to write? Because if I don't know, and I'm sitting there literally looking at a blank page where I have no conception of like what's going to come out, yes, that is annoying. But if I like already have the 40 or 50 beats that I know are going to make up the story, and I've really walked through it before I sit down and write, then I know, okay, today I'm going to write these 1 or 2 scenes, and for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and it'll be 3-4 pages at the end of the day, and I'll feel confident that these are the pages I'm writing. When I get to the point where I know I'm ready to write, which is like I have that, whatever form it takes, index cards, beat outline, a treatment of 8 or 10 pages, whatever it is, then it's like, okay, well, I know what I'm writing today. I can get up and I have my coffee and I sit down and, 15, 20 minutes of social media. Now at 12 o'clock, I'm going to write for the next 2 hours. And these are the 2 scenes I'm going to write. But if I don't have that, I know some people who just, I have an idea, I'm going to sit down, I'm just going to let it all come out. Stephen King notoriously does not outline, or he says he doesn't outline, which is how I think he writes a 700-page book on something that probably a story that could have been told in 125 pages. But not him. Most other writers seem to do this, their own version of outlining. So vomit draft tells me that like maybe I didn't outline enough. Like I just want to put something on paper just to get it out, but then I'm gonna have to rewrite the entire thing. And when I'm writing on assignment or something like that, like I don't have the luxury to do that. Like I have to really figure out like what is this thing going to be before I sit down and write, because those days writing pages have to mean something, because when I get done with it, I there's a deadline and I gotta get that script in.
I've never had an assignment, but Paul, do you have an answer? Do you want to take this?
In a way, we'll see. I'm one of those writers that I have to outline first. I just can't. I'm not one of those sit down and just let the story flow. I'm amazed by people who can do that, and if you can do it well, more power to you. But it's just not the way I operate. I I guess it's just the way I put a story together. I get, like I said, I start with the basics and just kind of start filling in the blanks. And sometimes it clicks right away. Sometimes it takes a few efforts to find the right way that I want the story to be told. And that, sometimes it doesn't take as it takes longer than I want it to. But again, I'm also not under the pressure of a deadline like Charlie might be. So I don't have that kind of pressure. But I also, again, I have a day job, so I can't, designate a huge chunk of my day to focus on the writing. But like I said, I just really enjoy the process of creating the story, because like I said way back in the beginning, I just write stuff that I would want to see. And I love when I see an original story, something I haven't seen before. And that is rare. I mean, I was thinking about this earlier. I was listening to another podcast about writing, and they were talking about an IP that's been done over and over. And I was like, oh, please don't say Peter Pan. Please don't say Peter Pan, because I know at least 2 writers who've done a variation on the Peter Pan story. And I'm thinking, well, that's great, and I'm happy for you. And maybe it did well in a contest or something or whatever. But I don't understand why someone would want to take another source material and just like, oh, here's a new spin on Peter Pan, here's a new spin on Snow White or whatever. That the initial one is good, but then other people think like, oh, well, if it worked for that other person, it's going to work for me too.
I've never done that, but I do understand it because I like money. So I'm the weirdo about the outlining, and I do outline, and I totally recognize the importance of it. I typically fail, and it's because I tend to find I'm not capable of getting the outline right, because I find that once the characters are behaving, and once they're talking, and once they're in conflict, they just go different places, and it'll come to me like, this character is not going to be behaving the way I needed the plot to have her behave. This character is going to do something the opposite of that. And so then you think, well, do I force it, or do I find a way to have that happen, or do I go with this other thing? And maybe it's a process of discovery. So that's part of the reason, and that's why I do a lot of rewrites. I mean, I've had scripts, Charlie, you've read some of them, that there have been like 40, not 40, but 6 substantially different versions with different characters. The person I thought was the protagonist.
For one script? For one script?
For one script, yes.
Oh my gosh, wow.
I've had 6 page 1 rewrites of one script. And some of them go back 6 or 7 years. One of them is based on a short film, because I spent so much damn money on the short film and locked into it.
See, I think that shows amazing fortitude, because like, for me, I'd get bored rewriting the same story in 9 different ways. I
don't get bored. I don't get bored because I'm always
enjoying it.
No, I don't. I wouldn't go that far. But what I'm passionate about is finally cracking it and getting it to the point where it can be what I always thought it could be. Right.
Well, I mean, Paul just mentioned that, right? I mean, you wrote a script and then you realized the supporting character was your main character. You rewrote the screenplay. So that I see that.
But about the vomit draft, Charlie, just answer your question. Like, I will often, I prefer to simply write very quickly, and I would prefer to just bang out 15 pages a day, even if it's completely, not a single word is going to be the same. Just so that I have the beginning, the middle, and the end of the scene. So I sort of know what some of the important lines are. So I sort of know what the important content is. So I sort of know where the transitions are, just so that I feel like I've, it's a cave and I've started to shine some light in there and I know what it is. And then I just start from the beginning, because otherwise I'll get so self-conscious, because I know how to write the action lines now, and have them really, sing and be interesting and be unique. And it's a lot of effort. You can sit there changing a word on a line. And you can do an hour just on one half of the page, one fragment of the page. And I don't want to get sucked into polishing a little third of a page, when for all I know that third of the page is not going to be in it. So I'll just rather do a first draft in 6 days and then go, okay, does this suck or what, and then go, act 2, they should not. I don't need that whole thing for 15 pages where they get the kid back They should have just got, it should have been like Indiana Jones where he just shoots them, because that's all a diversion. Because the more I spend time with it, the more I learn from the inside out what it's really about, what the feelings really are, what is driving these people. So it's a
process that works for you, right? I mean, it's a process that you feel comfortable with, and you've kind of learned over all. It's evolved for you.
But I always
so now
have
that's
the
how
delusion.
you write.
I always have the delusion that this one's the good one, and I'm always wrong. But
right.
just,
I mean,
there's no way around it.
As we talked about TV and how writers' rooms work, you know, I mean, I've never actually, again, the closest I've been in a writer's room was when we do these roundtables to do comedy punch-ups of screenplays, where we have the hive mind of 8 or 9 writers who are all throwing jokes into the mix. Now, when it comes to breaking a TV pilot or breaking a TV season, that always seemed kind of like a potentially fun thing to me, this sort of group brainstorming where you're sort of figuring out the whole episode in the room, every single beat of it, because then at the end of it, it's like, okay, we've got the whole episode 3 is done. Lukas, you take this. And Lukas walks out with just add dialogue. You know, you have the story, you have every beat, you have every scene. It's not like you have to go home now and go, what am I going to do? It's like, you know what you're going to do. You're going to go home, you've got the outline, and now you can spend 4 or 5 days writing the dialogue, but you know what the story is. So in that case, yes, I understand being able to buzz through it very quickly, because that thinking about the story stuff has already been done, but before you sit down and write it. But but you're doing it while you're writing.
Yeah, I mean, I would suspect that a lot of that, here's the outline, go write it, writer in a TV environment is a lot of it is based on the schedule. A lot of it's based on, okay, that's what the boss approved, so let's do it. But the truth is, I mean, you talk about on Top Gun Maverick, why is it so good? Because you guys tinkered with it for 2 years.
Yes.
I mean, if you just stop and say, gee, that sucks, how can this be, you know, they all called it plussing, I think it was a Katzenberg thing or somewhere. If you just stop and say, does that really, would she really just give her the keys so quickly, or would they have an argument about it? What is most real? You know, how do you stop and find the moments where somebody isn't behaving like a movie person who the writer needs to do something? When that person starts to take on a life of her own, and then you realize that, but if she does that on page 40, that big fight that I was thinking was going to have on page 60 is going to be repetitive with that. So then I think, well, for me, a lot of times these rewrites are a process of pulling up things. And the stuff that I thought would be on page 50 is really going to be page 30. The thing that I thought I was going to introduce on page 12, it's going to be on page 3, because you're just losing everything that's not the guts and the heart and the meat of it.
Yeah, it was. I don't know if you guys watched 24 when it was on, but I had a couple of friends who wrote on that show, and what they would tell me is that they always burned through story much quicker than they thought they were going to, because you had to write 24 episodes of a show. Each one of those episodes was 1 hour of real time. So you're telling like a whole 24-hour story door to door in 24 episodes, with every hour representing real time. So it's like they would frequently think, well, this beat is going to happen in episode 18. And they got there by episode 11 or 12. And they're like, oh, we're screwed, because we basically, we have to create more story now because we got there too early.
I remember those.
But anyway, that was, yeah.
I only watched the first couple of years of 24. It was too torture-y for me. But I do remember, like, they get the what's it thing in hour 10, and then the best friend turns out to be the bad guy, and it's like, oh, here we go again. And I also noticed that he got to any place in LA in 8 minutes, which was total baloney.
They made a rule within the show that anywhere in Los Angeles is reachable by car in 15 minutes. That was the internal logic of how the show works. And nobody ever went to the bathroom.
It's the principle of the thing you think it's about is probably to some degree what it's about, but the getting there is, these things are always, they work when they're narrow and deep, and they don't work when they're shallow and wide. And I think so Paul, you said, like, you've got all these friends and I can't believe they're not working and making money and being repped. And look, we didn't invite you on the show to punch you in the face. But we can tell you the truth as we know it, or the truth as I've experienced it, because I have done a lot of reading of other writers, and I've met them on Twitter, and I say, hey, that sounds cool. Can I check it out? And sometimes it's, very rarely is it great. Mm-hmm. More commonly, there's some aptitude there, and there's maybe a cool idea, but they're mistakes. They're amateur mistakes, and there's just, I think, a softness, and common mistakes are a lack of clarity. Like it takes too long to find out who it's about or what's the problem. The biggest thing that makes me stop reading as I've become more impatient is when the human behavior is not how I know people to be. And when I come to realize that I'm watching some writer's imagination of fake people. And so they're having a fake argument about why somebody didn't want to take the car. And then they're having a fake argument about the kid. And then they're having a fake argument. And it's not how I know people live. And it's not how they talk. It's not what they do. And so that becomes irritating to read. And on the other hand, I spent a lot of time reading like the masters, reading anything by Tony Gilroy. And I was like, God damn, why is this so good? Why is it so good? And, there are many, many reasons why Tony Gilroy is so good, but it's because every single subtlety and every single nuance, you just go, oh, that's real. Even though it's fiction, these little descriptions, like at the beginning of Michael Clayton, where the Tilda Swinton character is in a bathroom stall, and she's doing a breathing exercise that she read in an airplane magazine somewhere. And that's the language in this. That's never going to be in the movie. It's technically unfilmable, but it just gives so much about character and so much about reality. And I read Michael Clayton thinking this could really happen. If there were assassins and if there was a corporate scandal, this is how it would play. And that was interesting to me. So I was glued, on Devil's Advocate, same thing.
Well, isn't that all great writing, is basically instilling fiction with the sort of the patina of reality, no matter what it is.
Yeah,
right?
That is. And that's what, I think I've gotten better at. And it's very demanding. And so a lot of the amateur things that I read, it just, the action lines, I finally realized, why do I not like a lot of the action writing? Because a lot of writers who I read, they use good words, and they have a rat-a-tat-tat style, and it kind of, the pages move quickly. But I finally realized, why is this not working for me? And it's because I realized they were describing things that were just things. They were talking about autumn leaves. They were talking about, a car going fast, but they weren't people things. And those action lines, when they really sing, they're all about people. And if they're not about people, they have a certain interest in experience. And Jim Cameron's scripts are amazing, because everything he writes is about the sensation of holding one of those rifles, or being in that room in the dripping alien goop. I mean, he talks about temperature, and he talks about, Gorman and Vasquez are about to die. It's the secret, they hold hands, and it's the secret handshake being given.
Clasp hands.
Yeah. I mean,
that's a great moment in Aliens. Like I think we all point to that. We all point to that moment.
Because it's
I do want to.
Yeah.
Oh, please.
No, please.
Well, I was going to say that I've been reading. I've read for contests, and you can tell when a writer can't let go of the fact that they think they're writing a book, because a lot of the time the action lines, it's really dense text, because they go into way too much description about. They have put like 3 to 4 lines about what the character is wearing. And to me, that's a distraction, because and almost half of these scripts, the description for the male characters is handsome. And I want to say, well, they're an actor. Of course they're going to be handsome. But tell me, I don't, unless the character's appearance is relevant to the story, I don't need to be told that they're handsome. Tell me what kind of person they are, because I want to be able to form my own mental image of what this character is supposed to be like. If they're wearing a leather jacket with spikes on the shoulders, I hope that's not just because you think it sounds cool. It's because it's part of the story. It's part of their character. And so many times I will see what color hair the character has, or something physical about them that, I guess, to me, is irrelevant. That I don't need to know that, because I want to know what kind of character is this character, what kind of person are they, and just if you someone to say, hey, tell me what Bob is like. You're not going to say, well, Bob is 5'7.5" and he's got a big mustache and he likes to wear red suspenders. I'm like, okay, no, that's not what I asked you. I said,
aspiring writers really do struggle with novelistic stage direction.
Do you notice in your contest reading that scripts tend to be either they start way too slow or way too fast? It's either someone waking up and having an argument with a girlfriend, or it's someone's running down the mountain and there's aliens landing and then the vampire jumps out and they've blown up the world and it's the middle of page 2.
A majority of them, they start off way too slow, because I want to know within the first 10 pages, for the most part, who is my main character? What kind of story am I going to expect here? And I also find a lot of scenes, they don't know when to stop the characters from talking. That I adhere to the practice of get in late and get out as soon as possible and move on to the next scene. Some scenes, the characters, they're like 3 to 4 pages long when they don't have to be. They could be a page and a half long and just get to the same point, but a lot of it's just a lot of back and forth chit chat. And you're starting to lose my interest as a reader if I'm just seeing these two characters just back and forth. Like, what is the point of this conversation?
You know what that tells me when I read a screenplay like that? It tells me that they sent out their first draft. Like, they didn't reread it. They didn't. Whenever I write something, and it could be the pages I've just written, my wife will say, "What are you reading?" I'm like, "I'm rereading the pages I wrote." "Why you read it 10 times?" It's like, I know, but that's the way you learn how to chop it down. How do I say more with less? How do I say more with less? That's the whole key of screenwriting. It's not a novel. So everything I write, if it's a 4, I never do this, by the way. If it, like say it was 4-line paragraph, which I would never do, get it down to 3. If it's 3, get it down to 2. If it's 2, get it down to 1. There's always something that can be cut, and it is your job to do that. If your script reads like what you're saying, you didn't read it. You just kind of like, you sent it out there. You didn't go through it and try to like, how do I say more with less? Everything is about that.
Yeah.
Because that's how you cut pages. You just, you'll write a script. The first draft might be way too long. And it's 124 pages. It's like, you can't send out a 124 page screenplay. It's like, nowadays.
I want to say, so one of the most effective and shortest scenes that it is as to the point as possible, it's in Star Wars. So right after they escape the Death Star, and it's Leia is comforting Luke, and he's just kind of looking melancholy, and he says, "I can't believe he's gone." And she says, "There was nothing you can do." That's the scene, and that's all there. And there's no like, oh, I've only known Ben for 2 days, but he's already had a big impact on my life.
I've never been through the whole Star Wars screenplay, but I remember either George Lucas or somebody saying that like there's not a scene in there that's longer than 2 pages.
Yeah.
Everything is move. I mean, if you go through the whole thing, maybe there's 50 scenes, but they're all 2-minute long scenes. So you shouldn't have a scene that's running 5, 6, 7 pages. Now, if it's a set piece,
Sorkin,
Yeah, I mean, right. If it's a set piece or something like that, and like it's an action scene and it's like 4 or 5 pages, maybe. But like any normal scene that's like a building block of the story, yeah, it shouldn't be longer than 2 or 3 pages. I mean, max. You really should try to find a way to make it shorter, if at all possible. And if it's running like you're saying, "Hey, Bob, hey, how are you? Pretty good. What's going on?" Not much. Like, that's
that's the kind of stuff that's the kind of stuff I'm seeing in a lot of these scripts. It's just all this back and forth chit chat that it's not moving things forward. It's slowing it down. It's stalling out.
Every line should matter. Whether it's a stage direction line or whether it's a stage, whether it's dialogue. Every line should matter. And if it doesn't, cut it. Just get it out of there. Even if you love it, you don't need it. Just keep going. Yeah.
I remember a point from an hour ago. But no, it's a little bit relevant, which I didn't make at the time. But you talked about like you've got your friends, and here we all are all trying to live the dream and get into this. There is like a world of people who work at these companies who are just interns at these companies, and that's the track. It's like there's a caste system where we come from wherever we come from, and we sit at our keyboards and write these things. And Charlie was, you did the you have the inside. You were in that other caste, so you've got the benefits and experience that you have. You're also talented and hardworking, which is why you had a job for 30 years and a really high-powered job. Got to kiss my car partner's butt sometimes. But we've all heard the stories where like there was a mom here, and our girls are friends with their kid, and we were talking to this mom who used to be an actress, and she worked at a production company once, and like some script would come in, and they would go, "Hey Jenny, read this. Is this any good?" And she's like 23. She's like,
yeah.
She was like, "I'm embarrassed. I don't know if it's any good," but that is the illogic of how these places are run.
Well, I can top that one. So a friend of our families, our daughters knew each other growing up. The older daughter, who's probably at the time is like 16 or 17, summer internship at a management firm. They were having her read scripts for coverage, and like, so you have to grab the interest of a 16, 17-year-old girl, and like hopefully that she'll think it's interesting enough to want to recommend it or say, "Oh yeah, this has got potential." And
this is a person growing up in the age of TikTok.
Yeah,
where you've got to grab them like this.
Well,
like
I've noticed this with the blacklist, and it's a problem I think with contests too. With the blacklist, you definitely get it's hit or miss with their website if they assign it to somebody who actually knows what they're doing, and they say that they don't hire anybody who hasn't had at least a year's experience, but there are all these like wokey millennials where if you do a certain kind of subject matter, they're like, ew. Or on the other hand, if you do a certain kind of subject matter that they politically approve of, they elevate it. I went through, Charlie and I have talked about this, where we went through at the scripts they tweet about, and they tend to have like medicinal subject matter. And I don't want to get into the details of what that means. I don't even think it's necessarily a bad thing, but it is, there's these gatekeepers who, I don't know what happens if you give them Michael Clayton. It's like, this is mean. They murdered a guy. It's like, who knows?
I don't get it.
Don't know.
But you like to hope that the Michael Claytons will still make its way to the top. The cream will still rise to the top.
You really do. But I've had good scripts that they get a 5, and then sometimes it's just I have had 4 scripts at the blacklist within the last, and I'm spending way too much money with these folks, but it's my choice and I did it. I've had 4 scripts that had factual errors where I said, "Hey guys, this is wrong," and they gave me a redo.
Oh,
and that's probably that means 40% of them had a mistake that they had to say, "Whoops." I mean, who are these readers? That's pretty bad. The last one, Charlie, was that demonologist script where the person really didn't get it or like it. It's a horror movie I wrote. And they said, I don't, when Carol defends her mother from da-da-da-da. And I wrote and said, guys, it's not her mother. It's her mother-in-law. I mean, I guess this reader's never been married, but it's a big distinction.
Yeah, it's a huge distinction.
So
yeah.
They owned up to that one, and then the next reader liked it. But people put so much stock in, I got an 8. I did once and it didn't do anything. Nobody cared. And Charlie and I have been through those log lines, and we're like, Charlie, if you were at your company, would you read any of these? And the answer is like out of 10, maybe 2 or 3 of them would be worth checking out.
Yeah, I mean, the hope springs eternal. My entire job for over 30 years was to try to find interesting ideas and scripts, and I would read anything and everything, and they could come from the oddest places. We were talking last week about the guy who pitched the Peeps candy, like a movie based on that. One time one of the guys that came in was the guy that wrote the Emoji Movie. And,
wow.
And it was the weekend that he'd gone on a bunch of pitches the weekend his movie opened, because interesting trivia point, the Emoji Movie made in its opening weekend, it was up against Dunkirk. Chris Nolan's Dunkirk. $1 million difference in the gross between those 2 movies, Dunkirk and the Emoji Movie. And the guy who wrote the Emoji Movie, he was just like, yeah, you know, I had this idea. I wrote it really quick. It was timely. It got set up very fast. They made it very quickly. They got it out in the marketplace. And it's like, you know, I wouldn't have written the Emoji Movie, but this guy has a produced credit now. And so he struck while the iron was hot, and that was a timely thing. And I don't know if he had to worry about copyright or trademark. He just wrote an Emoji Movie. And so that's the thing, which is, you know, look, there's no right way to do any of this. We were talking about, you know, public domain IP. 2 of the projects I sold were based on public domain IP. That's me. I don't know. I maybe I was thinking like you, Lucas. I want to make money. I want to sell something. So at the time that I wrote those things like that were kind of in the zeitgeist. And yes, there were a million people who wrote a Robin Hood script. There were a million people who reinvented Three Musketeers in space or whatever the thing is. So that's why one of my colleagues used to call them evergreens. There will always be, you know, 3 years from now, a new Tarzan movie, or a new Sherlock Holmes, or another Dracula, or, you know, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So, you know, as somebody who worked in development all these years, I trained myself and said, okay, if I'm going to do Hyde, what would I do? What's the spin on Jekyll and Hyde that you haven't seen before? And it's a good creative exercise, because you really have to go through a lot of different permutations to figure out, what would I do with that? What would I do with Santa Claus? What would I do with, you know, a Bible story, anything like that? Now, whether or not you sit down and write it, that's a whole different kettle of fish.
I want to point out, I've never written something just cynically for a cash grab. I mean,
it wasn't totally cynical. I still wanted to write something I enjoyed. It has to be a good story. But yeah.
What I've done, though, and very studiously, I think, is that I have pursued projects that I thought would have a place in the marketplace because they were so inexpensive, and because I was like, how can I don't like horror movies. I've never liked horror movies, but I like 2 of the greatest of all time, Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist. So I did something like that.
Right.
And I did
that makes sense.
I did a horror movie, an Exorcist script, that turned it upside down because the demon is actually inside the Exorcist.
But that's again smart, which is take something old but make it new by putting some sort of a fresh spin or a twist, because Hollywood loves that. You're not coming in with some mushy log line, like I said, about a guy wants to be an actor and he moves to New York to audition. That's not a movie. But what's the twist on that? Like Dave, the movie Dave with Kevin Kline. That's high concept. That's very high concept. So like that's something that you can play with. I remember like thinking, you know, what's a twist on Frankenstein, the story of Frankenstein, right? Who's the body that gets reanimated in Frankenstein? What life did he live before he became the creature? Maybe there's something there. I don't know. There could be a whole sort of backstory as to who that person was, and like I haven't figured it out, but it's like these stories that kind of take a twist on things. There was a script that sold called Nottingham, where the twist was that the sheriff of Nottingham was the good guy and Robin Hood was the bad guy. By the time they made the movie, they switched it back. So the whole point of like doing the twist got lost in development. But he sold the script. It was at least something that he kind of changed. So you can do that. You could take, you know, an IP, but do an original version, an updated version, a sex switch version, like look at it from a different angle. Obviously Wicked, the play, you know, which was based on a book, that's different. Okay, I'm going to do the Wicked Witch as the protagonist. All right, so maybe somebody will write, you know, Cinderella's stepsisters as the protagonist. You know, maybe they weren't so mean. Maybe Cinderella was the pain in the ass. Maybe those poor girls are the ones that were like, just like, I don't know, you know what, our sister left us behind. We were ever nice to her, and she was always standoffish, and she got to marry a prince. And I don't know, there's always those kind of stories. And so maybe somebody will sell that to Netflix or Amazon. A lot of times, I don't know if this has ever happened to either of you, like I'll come up with a throwaway idea that I'm like, that's like, I'm never going to write that, or that's too silly or too obvious, whatever.
Somebody else sells it.
6 months later, you're just like, son of a bitch.
Well, we're almost at an hour and a half. So as they say on CNN, you've got 10 seconds, Paul. Meaning of life? No, I'm joking. Take as much time.
I almost had it. All
right.
So it's almost like the end of Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. Be nice to each other and, you know, do nice things.
But
It was very
this
nice
is
to
all
talk
new
to
for
you.
us. I mean, we've really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you for doing this with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Great,
We
Paul.
wish you
Thank you.
much success. I'm very impressed at your mindset and how hard you've worked, and you have a good.
Your attitude is a good attitude for somebody who wants to work as a screenwriter. You need that attitude to make it. Yeah, you do.
Well, I don't really have any other choice.
Write something cheaper,
Oh no, try that. I wrote you were saying you don't like horror. I don't like horror either, but I love horror comedy because I always go for what's the comedic approach. So I wrote like my version of a pretty much like a zombie movie, but it's a different twist, it's a different approach, and I had a lot of fun writing it. Sure, I've only done 2 drafts, but it needs a lot of work. And if someone's interested in it, hey, I'm not going to say no.
Oh, and also before I forget, you did recently on your blog, you posted like 100 something blog lines.
Oh well, yeah. So it's I can do this real quick. So it's so my blog again, Maximum Z, and I have done this like 3 or 4 times in the past. It's the script showcase. So I ask writers to send in pretty much a thumbnail sketch of their script, title, genre, author, logline, any awards, and your email if people want to read the script. And the first time I did it, I got like 180 scripts, and I've done it like twice a year the past couple of years. And I just did it a few weeks ago, and I got like 115 scripts. And for film and TV, because I opened it up to everybody. And I got to say, some of the concepts that came in, I immediately got back to the writer, said, this sounds really cool. I would love to read it. And they were like, yep, yeah, please go ahead. And I've got like 7 scripts in my reading queue. I don't have to do notes. It's just reading for my own pleasure. And it's like, that's the best of both worlds.
Well, that's very cool of you. And I'm glad there are decent people doing good things for other people. We hope that this show is useful, and also the stuff, your things are all free. I mean, we want this show to be free, and we want it to benefit people if they can start to get, if any of this advice helps them choose their concepts better, or choose what they emphasize in their projects or emphasize in the narratives. I mean, who knows, but it is a nice thing to try and help the community.
Okay, can I just do one shameless self-promotion real quick?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so I also, again, I have my blog, maximumz.blog. So I also have a book that, over the past 8 years, I've done about 100 interviews with script consultants and filmmakers and writers in other mediums. And so I have a 3-volume set. This is volume 1. It came out in April. Volume 2 comes out in a few weeks. These are some of the interviews that I did with consultants. So it's them. So a lot of screenwriting books are all about how do I write a script? And these are more like, how can I write a script and make it better? And because all of these consultants give feedback about this is what you should focus on. It's about theme and conflict and character. It's not just about, interior Bob's living room day and, Bob walks into the room type of stuff. This is about, you've got your script. How can you improve it? And also because I love to bake and I love to cook, there's also questions I ask each person what their favorite kind of pie is, because that's my thing.
Okay, then.
Very.
Well, thank you for being with us. We'll get this.
My pleasure.
We'll get this posted as soon as we can. We'll email you. And
thank you.
Maybe we'll talk to you again sometime. But thank you. It's very nice to meet you. And thanks for coming on this show with 2 people you didn't know at all.
Oh, thanks very much. It was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Okay, Charlie, you want to take us out this week?
Thank you, gang. I'm glad you had time with us again. And if you have any comments, questions, ideas, please put it in the comments underneath the video on YouTube. Thanks for joining us.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.